To you. You're listening to 730 KLOE and 102.5 KKCI in Goodland as we hit the airwaves this morning on what would have been Curtis Duncan's show, the Good Neighbor Hour, here on KLOE and KKCI. And today we've gathered a crew together here to honor Curtis and to talk about his life here and how he affected our area here in northwest Kansas. And so kind of gathered a panel of a group of us that got the honor and privilege and to work with Curtis over the years. So we've got Marty Melia, and we're going to bring him in here in a minute, and he's going to talk about Curtis and a little bit of his history and how Curtis came to be here in northwest Kansas. Paul Heskett, who, again...
well, I had the privilege of working longer than anybody on earth. 30 years that he was there, and I've worked with him for all 30 years. So to say I was there longer than anybody else he ever worked in any market. So what a pleasure that was.
And Sacha Sanguinetti, again, a former manager here that got a chance to manage with Curtis for a very long time here as well. So we'll welcome our whole crew in today. We also had some online comments, and some of those we'll have on today, and some of those we'll talk about when we have Curtis's services here in a couple of weeks. So, Marty, I kind of thought we would start with you today, and again, general manager here and owner of the radio stations of KKCI, KLOE, and KWGB, and you also have a podcast and had a chance to sit down and talk with Curtis, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of go through a little of Curtis's history, because here we talk about 27 years, and I know some of that ended up on the papers and on the media stuff that was released, but his career's been much longer than that in the media industry.
Right. Well, thank you, Chad. Curtis, his career spanned well over 50 years, 55 plus years, and it all started in Gardner, Kansas, which is now a suburb basically of Kansas City. These are things that I had known about Curtis before. Was working with him for about 12 years, and a couple of years ago I asked him to be on my podcast, so we could really sit down and find out everything about him that we could. And he started. He's so proud to announce that the first time he was ever on the radio was when he was 10 years old, which I'm guessing was about 1964. And he was at the Johnson County Fair in the Kansas City area. And, he saw a couple of guys from KOFO, radio station out of Ottawa, broadcasting there, and walked up to them and kind of stared at them for a while, he said, and then asked them what they were doing during a break. And he said, well, we're broadcasting on the radio. And they started questioning him and who he was and what he was doing there. And they finally said, we're going to interview this guy over here who's got a cow or something, and would you like to interview him? And they gave him the microphone, and he went over and interviewed the guy, and the rest is history, as they say.
He said he was paid 2 chocolate milks for his interview.
Exactly. He got 2 cartons of chocolate milk as pay, and they how fitting it Curtis would start his career at a fair, which is what he loved to do here in our area. So he went off and on, he said, for a few years. In his early teens, he worked through high school at KOFO. Rod Cupp was the manager there, who I'd heard of. My dad knew Rod. And so when Curtis graduated from high school in 1972, he applied to military police school at Fort Dix. Where is that, South or North Carolina, someplace? He had an uncle that I think gave him a reference or whatever to get into this school. So he went down there, and he'd gotten sick a couple of times, pneumonia, and it just didn't work out. And so he came back back to Kansas, and again went directly back to KOFO for a while. And I'm not sure the timelines on all these other places. Curtis kind of lived the radio life that we hear so much about, the up and down the dial, as the song goes. And he spent some time at a station in the St. Louis area, St. Louis, and then in Ohio, Middletown, Ohio, WPFB, which was he had also worked at a broadcast school there. He actually, by then, he had enough experience that he was, the people there asked him to teach what he knew about broadcasting, and he did that as well. And I think in between he was in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, doing television at a TV station up there, KSTF. It was an ADC affiliate, I believe, in Scottsbluff. He also, I think he did a stint in Topeka. I never pinned him down about that, but I remember him talking about being in Topeka. But initially, and then came to Wichita, where he worked for Larry Steckline, and I think that's how he ended up in Colby, was through the Steckline connection. And what, Chad, did he start there? 96,
95, I think is what we came up with.
Yeah.
And was there for just a couple years, yeah.
So about that time, my dad had retired in 93, and he started the Good Neighbor Hour in the mid-'60s, and kept it going all through the years. And when he retired, we had somebody, I think Rusty Renner was filled in for a while. I did it off and on, and we just didn't find anybody that really fit the bill for what my dad had created. He created this folksy, storytelling style of lots of farm news and interviews. He had Dale Schilling on with him for about 12 years. Was a local extension agent here. So about 1997, somebody gave me a tip that Curtis was interested in moving on from 𝐒𝐤𝐞𝐢𝐿𝐥 in Colby, and so I set up a meeting with him. We met at the Village Inn. I bought him a piece of pie, I believe, and we sat and talked for a long time. And one of the things he said that I think sewed it up for me was the fact that he says the people at this location think I talk too much. And I thought, well, that's perfect. That's what we want. We want somebody who's going to talk. And
boy, did you find the guy. You found him, didn't you?
Yeah.
He talked.
Yeah. He was the guy. And I got to tell you what he threw at me, how much money he needed to have to do this job. And I choked a little because it was a little bit higher than what we normally, we're a small market station. We're limited in what we can pay people. But I didn't hesitate a minute. I said, you got it. And he never got paid enough as far as I'm concerned, through the years. And so he came over, I think it was late August. No, it was Labor Day. Labor Day was his first shift, which he volunteered. I told him, you don't have to work on that day, but he said, no, let me do it, and I can help me learn things while nobody else is in the building. And then a month later, late October, he had his first blizzard, 2 days, 27 inches of snow, and got to spend the night a couple of days alone in the building. And that, again, the rest is history. He just lived for days like that. So we enjoyed 12 years working together, and we all have a billion Curtis stories, and people have been texting me phrases and things that Curtis said. Curtis-isms, we call them Curtis-isms.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Duncan-isms, or either way, yeah.
Right. So there's how he ended up here in Northwest Kansas. And one other thing I want to throw out: when I interviewed him at that meeting in Colby, and then several times later, he repeated this, that he really wanted to find a place to stay. He was tired of moving here and there, and on the podcast a couple years ago, I said, you found your place to stay, and he, this is his home here in Northwest Kansas. So,
agreed.
That's how Curtis got here.
You mentioned Duncanisms or Curtisisms, or either way you want to call it, and I think that was some of the things that made him unique. And sometimes you rolled your eyes a little bit, maybe, or laughed, but it was what made him so unique and so different, because you just came to expect it.
Well, one of his later ones, they're going to play music out to this festival south of town, and he came up with the Hokey Pokey on the Smoky. That's gold. That was just a couple 3 weeks ago. Gold, I think.
Yeah, and just made it up right then and there.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the oldest ones he did was "It's Two Hat Day," and I think that's an old one everybody uses. But take two hats. It's a 2 hat day. It's going to be windy today.
Yep. In case one blows away. Yeah, and then we had the hard hat was coming up more and more lately with. So there's going to be some hail in that area tonight. So make sure you have your hard hat prepared for that, or a helmet. But I think we all have, as you kind of said earlier, a bunch of those. Sacha, bring him in here a little bit. You kind of had a unique look at Curtis that maybe we didn't have prior to, and turned out to be a very good one for us, and on the sales end of things. And as a long time on air guy. And, a lot of stations, and we've been in different markets, you have that almost a rift sometimes between you got your sales staff and your on-air staff, and we do things a little differently out here. We're kind of very intermingled in those departments, but kind of gave Curtis that first real role at sales, and I was amazed at how well he did.
Yeah, Curtis, let's face it, Curtis is a relationship builder, right? And we all know that's what sales was about. He built the strongest of relationships with his listeners, and so it stood to reason he could do that with the business community as well. And he certainly took that task to heart, and he also saw a way to make some more money, which we always know was a motivator for Curtis. And so. It was a great moment in his career, I think, to try something different, and as we all know, we all did the same thing too. We all did that hybrid. Hey, we had the on-air recognition, and consequently, people recognized us instantly when we didn't have to break through or make those cold calls if we were already on the air, because people already knew that. And Curtis certainly took advantage of that and helped a lot of businesses. And, in a lot of ways, Curtis and Paul are very much alike in that. And Chad, Marty, I know you can speak to this with authority. I don't know that anybody could get under your skin sometimes as a manager, more so than Curtis or Paul, but they were sharpening tools. They were constantly reminding you what community broadcasting is all about, because sometimes we get caught up in the money making and the budgeting and making sure we hit that bottom line. And good broadcasters, now great broadcasters like Chad and Curtis, would constantly, I saw it as reeling us in as managers, and reminding us what true local broadcasting was all about. And both Curtis and Paul are some greats. Boy, Northwest Kansas, how fortunate to have a Curtis Duncan and a Paul Heskett and broadcasters like that. And we were very fortunate to be able to work alongside them. Paul, I'm talking about you like you're in the past tense. I don't mean to.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the memorial fund money to start running in. But I appreciate that compliment. That's a nice comparison.
Yeah, it's almost...
I got to interject that I can't think of any market that I'm familiar with that had two personalities in it, like Curtis and Paul. Just unbelievably unique and amazing and entertaining.
You know, I was in the market for roughly 10 years, and there were some people that moved through the stations, and you know, college kids that came and went, and others, and whenever someone would move on, that was always a statement of mine: is wherever you go, wherever your journey takes you, whether it's in broadcast or a different industry, I can guarantee you will never work with another cast of characters like you worked with here in Northwest Kansas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to have them stay so long, that's the, you know, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I can't tell you how many announcers we had coming through. In fact, my dad always had a thing, you know, we had entry-level people all the time coming out of college. He'd tell them, we want you to be gone in 3 or 4 years. And he says that as a compliment. We want you to have learned it enough to where you could move to a larger market. And the good ones always did. Wyatt Thompson, Larry Hebner, a couple of names that went on to bigger and better things. But to have Curtis and Paul stick around, it was fantastic to have that quality here.
Well, I don't know about bigger and better. I could have gone to bigger, but I don't think I ever could have found better. But it's, again, a compliment to be compared to Curtis. And I saw that too, Sacha. I remember you and I talking about, he's well known. His name is all throughout. We got to get him into sales. I mean, everybody knows him, and he's hungry enough. And, boy, to be one of the top billers in the entire company. And I complimented him all the time. Gosh, Curtis, you're part-time salesman. I'm full-time salesman. You're on the air every day. You don't hit the streets till 11 o'clock, 12 noon, and then you're back doing things in the evening. I go, I don't know. I mean, you're a hero. What you bill per month and a constant billing while you're only a part-time salesman or part-time announcer, whatever he was. But he wore two hats there and he took both to the extremes. Great salesman and way on the radio early morning till if it was bad weather late at night. So he did something I don't think I could do. I don't think I could be that much on the air and yet still keep my billing up like he did.
I just thought you were going to say hours in a week. I think you work more hours in a week than you do in a month. But not that you know. Well,
I'll take that as a compliment as well.
It is. You're just as productive in that as well.
Well, he was one of a kind. Anyway.
Yeah. No, and I meant that as a and you know, and we talk about county fairs, Marty, and you brought that up, and that's been the tough part of, I think, for our staff a little bit this week too, because
the timing.
This was Curtis's season, man. He was so geared up and talking about fairs, and we all have the stories, and then we have the that Hawaiian shirt that came out every year about this time, and was ready to go.
That Hawaiian shirt came out way too many times, I thought. He loved it. Because people would compliment it. Always comment on it anyway, as far as... I don't know how many I'd get... Sacha, you saw me do this. We'd get a couple, 3, 4 shirts of, our Ag Network or for rocking him then for all our stations on there. I gave him some of the best ones that came in, my best colored ones, because he didn't like wearing black. I never saw him wear any of them. It was always those Hawaiian things. So, yeah, he wore them a lot.
And then the famous interviews of goats and
chickens.
And hogs and things like that.
I about drove off the road on that chicken interview. It was just absolutely perfect. And I bet somewhere on a cassette tape there's that interview somewhere. Interviewing a chicken.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
The amount of tape we found in this building this week, going through with audio of Curtis, and oh my goodness, I wish more of it was labeled so we can find things faster, but a lot of great things. One of the things, Sacha, I know you were involved in this and nominating Curtis for the Sonny Slater Award, an award that Paul's won as well, and that is an award for service to the station and to the community. And we bring that up. It's been in a lot of the stuff we've put out here, but it is a very high honor in the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and he was able to get that award, and I think was one of the most memorable speeches I can remember at a KAB convention.
Oh, that was Curtis's time to shine, and he took full advantage of it. He had that audience in the palm of his hand at his award acceptance speech, and I can't. Marty, you're a Distinguished Service Award winner with the KAB, a member of the Hall of Fame, and I think Curtis would have been honored by that. But for Curtis Duncan, that Sonny Slater Award was his Hall of Fame. That I don't think there's an honor that he would have been more proud of than receive, or that he was more proud of than receiving that Sonny Slater Award for service to community and station. And that, you know, if you wanted to pick an oversimplistic way to sum up Curtis Duncan's service to community and station would probably be it.
Amen. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And I was on the KAB board when they created that award. His name, Sonny Slater, was, I think, a Salina announcer. He had been killed in a farm accident, and Cliff Shank there in Hutchinson moved to have that award created. And since then, it's gone to all kinds of Curtis Duncans through the state of Kansas since that. This has been since the 80s, mid-80s, I think, and it's so deserving. And so now we've got to work to get Curtis and Paul into the Hall of Fame. So, and it'll happen, I'm sure.
You aren't telling me I got to pass before I receive that award. It seems like we wait, and then, by the way, he was.
Yeah, it's not easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy, especially for Western Kansas. I'm going to editorialize a little bit here.
All right.
I'm sorry about that, but I've tried to get people from our area in there, and every year it never fails. It's somebody in Western Kansas, Salina. You know, they think Salina is Western Kansas and beyond, usually from the metro stations, and I don't care what it takes. There's many of them, Paul and Curtis, Rich Epp, and others that deserve to be in that Hall of Fame from Western Kansas. So, I'll do everything I can to try to help to make it happen. But,
I know when I was nominated, the Sonny Slater Award, I read what Sonny Slater was. Up every morning with broadcast news at the station at 4 a.m., dedicated there to... I go, that's Curtis Duncan. I mean, love the award, but I never had the commitment of on-air 4 a.m. Actually, I'd get texts from him at 4:30 Central Time, and that's 3:30 Mountain. I thought, why is he at the studio that early? But you couldn't make him... I kept saying, Curtis, we got to find an exit for you somehow. I'm afraid these early mornings, and you're selling all day, and you're coming back, and you're doing severe weather, you know, but if we'd have we talked about saying, let's cut down his on-air time, or let's cut down his sales territory.
We did a little bit, but still, yeah.
I said, it's just, you're going to... He would, I mean, that was his life. If you took on-air away from him or sales away from him, it would have been a shorter life, I'm afraid. He loved that. That was his life, and his radio listeners was his family.
Yeah, we go back a few years ago, and it was like, you know, we can do some of these segments, and we'll pre-record them the day before, so you don't have to be here at 4 o'clock in the morning. We're going to try to help. And it was, nope, this is how I do things. And so it was, he was stubborn that way, and in a very beautiful way, I guess. One way of putting it, he was so dedicated to getting the information out and talking to the people and being a part of it that was his way of
I bet
doing it.
All three of you as managers never had an employee like going, okay, we need you to back off. You just don't have to say that.
Please go home.
Too much. Listen, please go call home. It a day. It's a good week. We worried about him, just the hours he put in, but that was his love. That was his life.
Well,
it occurred.
Go ahead, Mark.
It occurred to me once or twice through the years, and we couldn't afford to do it, but to turn that old TV studio out there to a suite.
I can see that. Let him live right there.
Sasha's laughing because there was a bed put in.
I brought the bed in. That was me. I worried about him sleeping on that air mattress, so I'm the one who brought in the bed.
Well,
King size.
That's what I think. I mean, getting back, Marty had mentioned it earlier. The blizzard back in the fall of '97. Curtis spent many a snowy night in that building because he wanted to be sure he could be there for his listeners when he need him. His dedication to that was really second to none, and he would he would set up camp right there in the radio station on that. Marty, I got to know, where'd you guys get that couch? That was one of the ugliest couches I've ever seen.
somebody lost a bet.
You have no idea how many times I've heard that over the years. It came out of my basement, and I inherited from my mother. She didn't like it either, so so it was in our basement for many years, and it became Curtis's couch. Nobody else would use it.
Well, I'll tell you this: we replaced it, about 3 or 4 years ago, and it went the way of the dodo. But the new one he was very, very unhappy with because it was too soft. And so we we did replace that old couch, but he's still not happy with it.
Did that come out of your basement? No, probably not.
I don't know. Can't remember where we got the newer one from, but yeah.
You know what, guys? We're 25 minutes into this, and it just occurred to me. You know who would absolutely love this was Curtis, because he would love the fact that we've all sat down, we're getting together. There's been some bumpy roads over the years with different ownership changes, yada yada yada. But the one constant there over that 30 years was Curtis. And the fact that we sitting here now and talking, I can guarantee you Curtis somewhere has the biggest smile on his face right now seeing this group of individuals sit down and reminisce.
Yeah, you hit it right on the nose, Sacha. We had to do this, and to honor him. And I don't know how many times we've seen comments on Facebook this whole week. I saw one the other day from a Goodland person at Brain here. We had 2,300s, and which is rare right now. And this person said, Curtis, tell God thanks for the rain.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Just great little comments like that Curtis is showing up in,
Yeah, he would. If somebody never called in a rainfall report, he'd actually call them going, are you okay? You haven't called me for a week. And they go, Curtis, we haven't had rain for a week. Okay, just checking.
Yeah. We're adding another character to the cast here. Ross Volker has joined us in studio as well. And for the last, how many years now?
I think it's been 8.
Yeah, last 8 years, Ross has spent his mornings with Curtis.
Yep.
The two of them here in the studio on a daily basis, and I know you were adjusting here to life a little bit. I think you the other day just saying it's just weird to come in here and not have Duncan.
I mean, yeah, it's weird. It's no doubt. We simulcast the Morning Blitz here on KK or on KLOE, and I forget that he's not in here because he would flip it over. And so I'd be like, oh, shoot, I got to go over here and flip it over.
I got to do it myself.
I got to do it myself because he would do it. And there would be times, he would leave early to get started on a sales deal or something. He'd let me know. He'd say, hey, I'm leaving. Or he'd come through the window and he'd point like, I'm going. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah. And so then that would remind me to go flip it back to KLOE when we're done with the show. But there have been a couple days already. I'm just like, whoops. We're halfway through segment. I forgot he's not here. I got to do that. And it's weird to walk in, because when you walk in this building and you come up the stairs, you always walked right in and you saw him right there, right where Chad said, every single day with his mound of newspapers and CDs and all that stuff that he had around him that he needed. And he was a machine. He was a machine. He was a machine, and the way he did things. We joke about all the things that he had to have. I remember we were in here just cleaning up some stuff in the studio, and of course we get the paper saying, well, there's that rack over there on the right that's got the two, what looks like music stands on it, and you'd have it there. And I remember when he said, I got to have a place for my papers. I have to have a place. And Quinn would be like, why do you have to have a place for your papers? I mean, those two guys butted heads on that a lot, but Quinn installed that for him to put his papers on there and to just, and he'd have stacks upon stacks. And it was everything was handwritten. Like, I think
beautifully.
Oh, yeah, he was a wonderful had great penmanship. But he would sit there, like, every morning when we had access to Fox News. I don't know if people remember this, but he would come in every morning. You talked about texting probably at 3:30 in the morning, Paul. He would come in every morning, he would write down what the news clip was, the number of the news clips. In Fox News, it was numbers like 008144 and 008182. He would write it all down, what it was about, what the out cue was, and how long it was. He wrote it all down on a paper, and it would be full every morning. So he would
download them all.
He would download them all.
Unbelievable.
And so then that way he knew what it was. He's like, whoa, the president spoke in, Lithuania this weekend. Here's what he had to say. Click.
Yeah.
And then you knew the outcome.
And we would say, Curtis, you can just read it off the screen and click on the thing. You don't have to download it, and you don't have to write that out.
Exactly.
But that was his process, and that sometimes Sacha and I have laughed about it over. When we used to do ball games, everything was typed out and color coded. Sacha had to handwrite everything. That was his way of it sinking.
I remember Sacha handwriting everything.
So it's funny how everybody has their different quirks, but that was one thing with Curtis. It wasn't going to be played off the computer that way. He was going to download and have it all handwritten out.
Just imagine, a 6-inch, a foot by 6-inch piece of paper. It wasn't like a regular size 13, but he would write and it would be completely full from top to bottom, left to right, of just the number, what it was about, how long it was, and the out cue, and he wrote it all out, line per line. I mean, like we all said, we all do our own things. He had his own thing, but it worked. It worked, and as many times there were times where like, what in the world is Curtis doing? We were talking about. I heard it driving in. Marty, the 2-hat day or the hard hat deal. And for younger people like myself, you're like, what is this guy talking about?
Old school.
There were moments where I just remember sitting back and be like, this guy is brilliant. He had a way of writing, a way with words in certain ways. And I was like, I would have never written something that way, or never have told a story that way. There were ways that he was just absolutely brilliant in the way he wrote.
And we won't give examples of some of this, but there was times where he would slip things in.
I know where you're going.
You would catch it later on, and you were like, yes. Oh, my God, that was funny.
He made me drive off the road one time. I couldn't believe it.
So eloquent with it, and that's what was... I was talking with Paul recently, and I said, Curtis was every person's broadcaster, because he could simultaneously talk to his, I'll call it, more mature audience, while at the same time, making us chuckleheads laugh while we're driving down the road, and everybody would take it in their own way, and that was always the way he could do that was so eloquent. It was amazing. It was an amazing talent.
What I love too is you would bring it up to him later, like, did you mean to say that?
That's what I do.
And he would just, what do you mean? But he had that smile on his face when he did it, and you're like,
I didn't mean it that way.
It made it tough when, I was the guy that always had to fill in for him on the sign on and Good Neighbor Hour, and I just felt totally inadequate compared to what he prepared, how he prepared, and exactly the way you guys described it. And so, and the other thing about that, whenever I was on or anybody else was on to fill in for Curtis, it inevitably every time somebody would call and say, "Where's Curtis? Is he coming back? Did he leave? Is he coming back?"
Oh boy, yes. When he had that absence there with these health issues, with his heart attack,
gosh,
we could have, if we charged $1 for everybody, we could have paid for his hospital bill for all the people that called in or text or emailed.
How is he? What can we do?
Right.
Does he need anything?
Again, the response we're getting here. And it is a shame. We sit here and talk about him and praise him and one of a kind, but gosh, we just, lesson here in life, if we could just sit down, like you said, if he could have heard this tribute, and maybe he is now, but it'd been so cool to have a Curtis Day and just one day that we would have, 35-year anniversary or whatever.
He would have loved it.
It'd be like a helium balloon in here. You'd have to bring him back down, but he needed that.
He loved being and I don't mean this in a bad way, but he loved being the center of attention. He wanted that. He wanted to be on air. He wanted people to hear him. He wanted to be there.
But not in an arrogant way. And that was what made it great.
Not in a negative way.
He
loved it.
I think that's where the TV came in. You know, TV broadcasting is visual, and he liked visual. On Zoom, he'd be of that pretty color, get it right front here. I put mine on whatever that is so I don't see me.
Which we appreciate.
Yes, and Curtis was opposite, see me now. So maybe that's where the TV came in, but I made quite a few notes, too, that we'll share later on.
You know, guys, we could sit and talk for hours, and as Marty mentioned, a billion Curtis stories out there. But I think we'd probably be remiss if we didn't go any further without mentioning, you know, we talk a lot about his love for the radio industry, his love for his listeners, his love for the region. But we all know, and his listeners know too, that all of that was a very distant second to his love of being Papa Curtis. And I don't think we should go any farther without mentioning that, because I can tell you that, and I'm getting chills up my spine as I talk about it right now, that one of Curtis's favorite stories, if not his favorite story, was when his granddaughter was born, and he was on the air when he received word. And one of the things he talked about and he glowed about, you know, his listeners were crying with joy along with him and calling in, and to Curtis, that was, I think, maybe one of the most special moments in his broadcast career. But his love for his daughter and his granddaughter was unprecedented, and it was a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, and he shared it with us all the time on radio. And people loved that. Melia growing up, I mean, we heard about her years, her life growing up, and Curtis tells a couple of those stories on my podcast that I had about the granddaughter and Vega. And so you're absolutely right, Sacha. We need to point that out.
I think he has, I don't know how many pictures he had of Vega that she had done in kindergarten or through school going up, and he had them laminated in his office, and the love for them. And in this week, for me, dealing with Melia a lot in the memorial service, and which again is we can mention that again coming up on the 2nd at the Goodland Methodist Church here in Goodland at 10:45 Mountain Time, and we will also broadcast that here on KLOE that morning as well. But that love was reciprocated back the other direction too. And I know that it was nice that Melia actually was through. The week before, had dinner with Curtis.
You know, that was a amazing, blessing.
Yes,
because he was so dedicated to his listeners and to his craft. He never took as much time as he should have.
Well, but look
he
at
should
it.
have.
His family, I bet he has not that much regret, because Christmas time we invited him over. We had him at our cabin a few times, and it was hard to pry him away.
And that's my
We'd always
point.
go in the fall because it was before the busy snow season and after the severe weather season. His family was his listeners too.
He had time, I think, scheduled to go off here starting next week. I think he was going to take some time.
His 70th birthday was coming up.
He was going to go take some time, and I just remember when everybody said, "Well, I'm going to be gone for a few days." I'm like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And not please get away.
I think Sacha could attest to that too. There's been times like, dude, you need to take a break. Like we'll figure something out. We'll get through it for a few days.
He needed to be away a little bit more and spend more time with his family. I think. I know that they enjoyed spending time with him. I know he loved spending time with them. I just wish that he kind of would have taken a little bit more of that, especially a little bit over the last few years.
And one more thing, and Paul has to know here too, but you mentioned his family here, and I know the church family with the Methodist Church here was very, very big to him. We, like you said, I knew he was here for all the holidays, so you would ask him a lot, hey, do you want to come? We're going to have plenty of dinner. You want to, nope, I'm going to eat with my church folk. He had these people he ate with every year, and that was his extended family here in the Goodland area too. So
I talked to somebody the other day another member of his church family, and he sat in the same place every week at church, and she said it's just going to be tough to see that here's somebody else sitting there, or no, right now I don't think they let anybody sit there right now, but
I know. Had the same thing at all the concerts. I know there was a special seat for Curtis at all the grade school and middle school and high school band concerts and vocal and plays and all that. He had his seat there at the auditorium.
You know, speaking of that, when we were on this search for some of his audio and we're looking for that Sonny Slater deal, I went through his recorder, his infamous little recorder that he had everywhere. And there were countless audio clips of him hitting the recorder button and then having all this, you know, whether it was the choir or the kids' concert, or if he was recording the music, he had that on that recorder. It still is on there.
He loved high school, college choirs in the church and all that. He kind of old school.
Well, he also wasn't he the host for the quartet or the barbershop quartet? He loved doing that. Well, those were two big days in his year. He loved that.
He loved emceeing that barbershop or anything. A lot of different concerts. Antique Thresher Show. That was a big thing for Curtis.
That's coming up here.
It's not going to be the same. That was a big thing. And car shows and the on and on. The Flatlanders Festival.
Car races.
Yep, demo derbies.
It was, yeah.
And he loved the Thresher Show, and we mentioned all the 4-H'ers and the coverage he gave county fairs there too. So,
you know, we talk about Curtis's quirks and his stubbornness that he had, but if you really sit back and think about it, his stubbornness was always how do I put this in one direction. It was always on behalf of something that he truly loved and believed in. And oftentimes, more often than not, that was his listeners and his church family. He was always, nope, I'm not coming over because I'm spending time with the church, or I'm not coming over, or I'm not doing this because I have to be on the air. I have this commitment. And that's where that stubbornness came from. It was, it was always on behalf of what he strongly believed in.
And Sacha, I got a couple of stories I've been wanting to tell, and kind of relates to that stubbornness a little bit, but otherwise some of it's a little poignant too. But I remember on a Saturday morning, one morning the phone rings at 6 a.m. It's Curtis. He says, we have the space shuttle had broken up over Texas, and it was national news, and we were also, Saturday was the day of the Northwest Kansas wrestling tournament that we had sold and prepared for, and announcers set up and everything. And he says, so what do you want me to do? What are we going to do about the wrestling tournament? I said, well, we're going to carry it. He said, well, the network's going to have continuous coverage of this space shuttle thing. I think we should probably. I said, well, Curtis, I'd love to do that, but we're obligated. We have to carry the wrestling. And then a few years later, I think it was a Thursday morning, I go in, and that's where I was working with Curtis, like you were, Ross, every day at the same hour. I was on KKCI, and I'm sitting there doing my oldies show, and I hear in the background Curtis kind of running around, and news coming over on the KLOE side, and then I can't figure out what's going on. As I walk, Curtis runs by and says, the towers have been attacked. We've got something's going on. And I hadn't been paying attention. So I punched in the KLOE side, and I could hear Curtis's coverage in the network feeds, and I just walked over to him and I said, simulcast this now. So there's two different examples of where he was right in having continuous coverage, and 9/11 was to have him with us, and at that time was just amazing.
I actually remember that morning because I was working here at the time too, and I was driving.
That's right.
Driving over here from Colby to Goodland, and shouldn't say this, but I was listening to KOA out of Denver, and they had said something about that happening, and I called him and I said, Curtis, have you? And he goes, a plane hit the tower, and I said, yeah, that's what I'm hearing on KOA. He goes, I'm on it, and then same thing. Look over, and by the I think I was at Edson when I heard it, and by the time I was here, we were on all stations, and he had put together masterful coverage at that point in time, and
even
so
some
brilliant
local connections. The airport here was shut down in Goodland, and there were just
flights
all
landing
kinds
here, and he was all over it. Just a consummate professional under those circumstances, for sure. I got a message here, and then I know Paul has some things he wanted to touch on too. But his daughter, we talked about, Melia, is listening this morning. I got a text message from her just a second ago, and she's loving this, discussing her dad and what he meant to us out here. One of the things she said is that for the services next week for the celebration of life, not next week, but on the 2nd, she says she would like to invite everyone to wear their favorite fun color to the celebration of life at 10:45 on the 2nd at the Methodist Church here in honor of Curtis.
Great idea. Instead of the black that you do in mourning, it's going to be the festive colors of a festive life. Those Hawaiian shirts will have to come out.
Which, Ross, you kind of got the Hawaiian Husker in honor of...
I was rolling through my closet, and I saw this. I forgot about it, and I was like, well, what do you know? We'll just wear it today.
That's why Ross was late this morning. He takes a little more time.
Right. There's a little difference between Curtis
Sasha, I want to let you know, Chad said we don't need you till 6:30, and I was here at 6:20, so I was 10 minutes early, baby.
Look at you.
Which means he started at 4:20, but that's fine.
When you have 3 kids, you got to get going early, baby.
All right, Paul, I know you had some things you wanted to touch on a little bit.
Well,
too, and
almost 1 week to the hour, I wasn't prepared for the call from you, and but yet we knew it was coming. I mean, for all of us. But ever since he had the heart attack and he was on he'd had episodes and all that, so it wasn't so surprising. But again, I talked to him about, we need to find an exit for you, but we would have never. It was going to be sales and on air forever. He actually said, remember what he told you, how he wants...
He said, I talked to him one time, I said, we got to cut back a little bit, I'm worried about your health. And he said, I want to bruise my head on the microphone.
Golly, I remember
that. Yep, he wanted to be on the air.
He was on till the end.
Well, he said that on my podcast, too, exactly like that.
Yeah.
I remember him and everybody well for the barbershop and emceeing events like concerts, the Antique Thresher Show, like I said. Boy, that was a love. I did something one time that I hope he forgives me. I get all caffeined up in the morning, on my show.
No.
And I was playing a report of him being live at the Antique Thresher Show, and he's interviewing somebody. And he said something like, well, these machines are sure quiet little motors. And I couldn't help it. I'm in the background making all these motor noises over. And I always said Curtis was a lot like the Eagle on the Muppet Show. We cannot have that type of tomfoolery. This is very, he was very stern, and he goes, what was that? I go, I don't know. It was me being Heskett, and he was being Curtis, and he was all professional, and I'm opposite of that.
Sam the Eagle, I love it.
Yeah, his interviews were always so long. He could take a little whatever and make it 5 minutes. If Curtis could be known for anything.
Can I just drop in one note on that? How many people came up to me and said, I got to go into the radio station and talk with Curtis. I'm very nervous. And I said, don't worry, you'll be fine.
Yeah,
he will find a way. Because people are like, we'd have to fill a half hour. This was back when he had the hospital would come on and they would talk for a half hour to an apartment. And I remember my wife said, I'm so nervous. I mean, not that my wife doesn't mind speaking, but she's like, I'm so nervous. I don't know what we're going to talk about for a half hour. I said, don't worry. Curtis will fill.
Most broadcasters are like, God, I got to fill 5 minutes, and all this prep that you're. And him, it was like, I only get a half an hour.
That's all I get.
I remember a listener. They interviewed him with the Logan County picnic in the park. They do party in the park in Russell Springs, and the guy wasn't that fluent to being on the radio. He was nervous. He goes, my gosh! So he asked questions I never thought. I mean, we talked for 5 minutes, and that was tough for Curtis to keep it under 5 minutes. He could ask, just a great interviewer, made you feel very comfortable. Again, a great announcer. I'm going to talk about his storm coverage. And Sasha, I think you were manager at the time, but I remember you reading a forecast for the Colby area that was like maybe 1 to 2 inches, light snow. Curtis is on it's the end of the world. Chicken Little's right. We're going to see winds. And he was right, by the way. You guys where did he get that forecast? Well, Goodland to Burlington had 12 inches, just like he said, to 15 inches. And Colby had that slight dusting. So he was right on that, but he was so passionate, severe weather. And I remember a friend of mine owned the grocery store there in Oakley, and he says, I would pay Curtis Duncan $2,000 to do his winter forecast because people come, it's the end of the world, and they'd stock up on bread. You know how we get when it's...
How many?
I'll pay that. $2,000 because our sales are unbelievable.
The grocery stores loved him, and the restaurants hated him.
Right, my buddy at the bar just, good gosh, you're making it sound nobody's going to come out in this. So I liked how that worked. But he would stay all night in the studios, even ahead of time. And like I said, I'm the one that brought the bed in because I thought it was more comfortable. He was very spry. You know, one of the things I remember him saying during when we lose power, bring in your solar lights. And I never thought about that. We were out of electricity. I brought in my solar lights from outside, and I had plenty of lighting. Curtis said, and he says, I want to be known for this. And it's something he talked to the Weather Service about. And from that day on, the Weather Service, National Weather Service, at least out of Goodland, does this. And that's where they implement the milepost numbers when they give a warning. You know, when they'll say there's a severe thunderstorm warning in Sherman and Thomas County.
Yeah, affecting 𝐾𝐻𝐻𝐸 and blah, blah, blah.
Right. Well, people didn't know where, even at that time, they weren't saying this will affect the cities of 𝐾𝐻𝐻𝐸 to Oakley. They weren't doing that. So he got him to put in the towns that will be affected. But more importantly, he did the milepost. This will affect milepost 22 to 34. And Curtis worked with the Weather Service on that. So... and how it affect the towns. I love these little things. Hey, if you're big on this, leave your lights on if it's foggy. If there's fog, leave your lights on. If your wipers are on, turn your lights on. He's big into safety about tall crops this time of year. Boy, he just all the time, tall crops, and again, wipers. We had him go to, we sold quite a few, had different events in Oberlin, but the drive-in movies in Oberlin, there was one you and I couldn't go to. So we took, dusted off Curtis and put him in Oberlin. He had the time of his life because so many people there. That was kind of a stretch for his listening area, maybe. Boy, he went up and down Main Street and everybody knew who he was. Shook his hand. I mean, they all gave him the key to the whole town. But
he loved that.
He did love that, and he emceed that and did a remarkable job. But boy, what an impression Oberlin, Kansas, well, I guess had on him, but he had on that town, and so even the out areas that, and that's where we're hearing from, by the way, people's from quite a ways away. He loved taking photos. He took great photos. I mentioned I took him to the cabin, and twice it was the peak of fall colors, and my goodness, he took beautiful fall colors. And I told him
he has 3 cameras. He had four cameras. Yeah. He loved taking pictures.
I asked him why so many selfies of himself, and he says, we all know the day's coming, but he said, well, they're going to make good funeral photos. And
that's definitely a Curtis joke.
That is him, isn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned things he said, and you roll your eyes. And I told Sacha one of them about. I'm not telling this joke, but it had to do with fall time and undoing your hoses outside because it freeze. And he said something just nonchalant and threw it out there, and I about drove off. I go, did you mean to say that? Yeah. Well, yes, but I don't know what. I mean, I was just stating the facts. So anyway, the Sonny Slater Award indeed was a big thing for him, and well-deserved award. It ought to be called the Curtis Duncan Award now because, again, he was exactly like Sonny Slater up in the early mornings and all that. And Mike Fell sent me, something as well. Mike Cochran actually said this just to me a second ago. Over 20 years ago, it's from Mike Cochran, who had the morning show with him. 20 years ago, started a call-in radio spot talking about the products we have, being Mike Cochran, and what's going on for the week. Marty originally started it at 7 o'clock every Monday morning. Curtis took over for Marty, and we've been visiting every Monday morning since. His kind and positive demeanor was always enjoyable. First thing Monday morning, we'd talk about local events, the weather for a minute or two before going on the air. We all have been blessed to have Curtis and coffee every morning. Indeed, I hear that. I hear people saying my morning drive will never be the same. And Mike goes on to say, I understand that the things have changed in our walk through life, but this is a big one that leaves a void. Curtis, you will be missed by all in the little part of the world that we live in, from Mike Cochran. And then Mike Fell was a manager for a while, kind of a short time for Curtis Duncan. And Mike wanted us to pass this on. He says, of course, you know it's going to be sports related with Mike Fell.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen the baseball movie Field of Dreams, there's a scene where the audience meets a character, Dr. Archibald Moonlight Graham, played by the late, great Burt Lancaster. Now, Dr. Graham is seen walking through a small town in Minnesota late on a cold, cold night. Dr. Graham is offered an opportunity to play Major League Baseball for a second time at the Field of Dreams in Iowa. Dr. Graham turns down the offer to play ball and says that this town here is like a child to me, and that you care for it, and after enough time, the wind never blows cold again. And Mike says, that's how I feel about Curtis Duncan and his relationship with Goodland and the people of Sherman, Weskin, Cheyenne, Kit Carson counties, the areas. He's the closest thing to an old-time town doctor that made house calls, and a broadcaster will never be. Curtis will be remembered for as long as the wind blows through Goodland, Kansas. Well put.
That's great.
It was very, very well said by Phil there. I know we're running up against the clock here, but I wanted to get one story in, and I wanted to kind of piggyback off of Marty's stubbornness stories about how Curtis was so stubborn about some things. So we all know that Curtis was not the most technologically savvy. I mean, Chad and I, going through his things, found books how he tried to learn about the iPhone and learn about Windows.
Which, by the way, we got for you, Paul. We saved that for you.
I told my wife, I'm the next Curtis Duncan. They're going to start rolling their eyes, the stuff I don't understand.
But anyway, and so one morning I'm driving in and I'm listening to the Good Neighbor Hour, and it sounds different. I'm like, why does it sound like it's going through a phone? I don't get this. Curtis doesn't have a remote. You're not going to do a remote deal without anybody being there. And so anyway, I come into the studio, and there is Curtis. And he goes, my microphone is not working. I can't figure it out. My microphone's not working. I can't get any of the microphones to work. What in the world went wrong? He didn't want to miss being on air. So what he did was, in a bit of brilliance, he called the station line on his cell phone and then scotch taped his phone to the mic and did the show through his cell phone, through the cell tower, back to the studio line and out to get the show out. That is how he did that.
Story great is the scotch tape.
I know. Scotch taped it to the microphone. So his phone sat on top of a mic, and he talked into that. Come to find out, all he did was he moved the board closer to him, hence pulling some of the cables out of the back.
Them out, yeah.
All I had to do was pop them back in, and we were good. But, I mean, he wasn't going to look for that. But just the
ingenuity.
The ingenuity, right, to tape that phone and to still have the show on, despite it sounding like he was in a remote place, yet he was just in the studio.
This is coming from a guy who had technical problems in the first place, but you said it just right. Brilliant.
Well, my wife helps me with a lot of stuff, and then Curtis didn't have someone there, and at the studio I rely on everybody, and Curtis was a lot of mornings here by himself, so wow, what he did.
And we are getting up against the clock here. We've got about 2.5 minutes left here, guys. You got quick final thoughts from each of you, Sacha? You want?
The simple things, right? Curtis always appreciated the simple things. Paul and I talked about this last week. He loved a good bowl of his potato soup.
Amen.
He loved taking pictures of a beautiful sunset. So I would say, as we move on and remember Curtis, take time to sit down and enjoy the simple things, because Curtis, that's something he was very good at and he always appreciated.
Marty?
Yeah, well, again, some of the comments I'm seeing on the Facebook feeds. One, again, about rain the other night. The person said, well, I had 3,500s. I miss you, Curtis, is what they said, just like that. And so we miss him. We're going to miss him. I want to play back my podcast with him sometime over the next week or so with the family's blessing, of course. That he was remarkable on that podcast just a couple of years ago, still so articulate and just, it was very interesting. So God bless you, Curtis.
Ross?
He was a man of many skills that I don't think we knew. I mean, he was besides a broadcaster, he also graduated from barber school. So he knew how to cut hair. He would tell me how, you're supposed to cut hair a certain way. He would, and he was very, very big on, talk about Uncle Bill and his time there in the Secret Service.
And we talked about this week, the stories we missed this week.
I know.
With what happened with Trump, yeah.
Would have been nuts, but, he was more than just a radio guy, although we all knew him as that. He taught broadcasting for a while, and like I said, there were times when he made you want to pull your hair out. There were times. Many times, actually, in some phone calls. But there were moments of absolute brilliance that also countered that.
And when he was making you pull your hair out, it was because of love,
passion.
Yes. I mean, there was just
of something.
Yes, there were. Yes, and you were just like, I can't figure this out. But like I said, it was. Yeah, he will no doubt be missed. And then
Again, a true announcer. He was etiquette on the air. He was big about you need to slow down and talk, and he did. He was a great announcer, great voice. He could tell a story as the old school, as they used to. We've lost that art, but he could paint a picture like you're seeing it in your mind, because that's how you have to do it in radio. And afraid we've lost that forever. There'll never be a Curtis Duncan. If you're thinking we're going to replace him with somebody nope. But
I have the unenviable job of doing what can't be done.
Yeah.
And that is trying to find somebody to come in and not replace but follow Curtis. We will have that. We will be back with a Good Neighbor Hour midweek next week. It'll be a little patchwork for a while, but he will be replaced. It will stay in Goodland. We will. One of the things we've talked about this week, we have a change in ownership and some changes here that we're excited about in the future of these.
And he was so excited about.
So excited. We're going to have new studios.
New format.
New format.
Loved. Yep.
And I can't say publicly where that's going to be yet, but we do have something looks like nailed down on that. The format will be breaking out here in about on the 29th, I think, is when we're looking at. He was so excited about all these things coming, and I feel terrible that he didn't get to do it.
Last message, when we lost him that night, he told me how excited he was. New ownership, new format, and having new studios. Boy, that was, I go, maybe good timing. I don't know. I'm sure now he'll be up there looking down. I'll miss him forever. Loved him like a brother.
All right. Guys, thank you for joining in this morning. And it was an honor for all of us, I know, and a privilege to work with Curtis, and he will we'll never forget him. He's been a huge part of our lives and the lives of this community, and we can't overstate that enough. Reminder to those listening, there is a celebration of life service for Curtis coming up on August the 2nd. It will be at the United Methodist Church in Goodland, 10:45 the start time. Afterwards, there will be some snacks and refreshments served, and we'd love to hear from all you. I know Curtis's family would as well, and some of those stories and memories that you have there, and they would appreciate that. So, again, that's coming up at 10:45, and make sure you wear your brightly colored, fun, festive shirts in honor of Mr. Duncan there. So
I would tell you, his speech when he won that award at KAB, and it was voted on by his peers, was so funny, was so entertaining, like I've never heard before. If we can try to bring some of that back. But his first story of the interview he did where the little kid cussed on the air and how he painted that picture, just beautiful.
Yeah, I could see it go into the microphone and down the wire and through the
and down to the studios and up the antenna and out to the into
transmitter
people's
and
radio
into space, and then he
paint a picture.
He could. Appreciate everybody for joining us on this today. Thank you guys very much, and like I said, he'll be loved and missed forever out here.
Yep.
It's 7:02.
Very well said, Curtis. That was his cue every day to Ross. It's 7 o'clock, and time to turn things over to Ross Volker.